What if the question of what happens after death has already been answered, just not by humans? What if something that isn't from this world has been watching us die for thousands of years and knows exactly what comes next? I wasn't looking for answers about the afterlife. I was a military guard assigned to a facility that doesn't exist on any map, guarding something I wasn't supposed to think about too much. My job was to stand watch, follow orders, and never ask questions that weren't written on a briefing sheet. The thing inside that room wasn't violent, and it wasn't hostile. It didn't scream or threaten or try to escape. It just waited, calm, patient, like it knew time worked differently for it than it did for us. Before every shift, we were given the same warning. Do not ask it about God. Do not ask it about death. Most people followed that rule, not because they were afraid of punishment, but because something about the subject made the air feel heavier. I didn't follow that rule. And when I finally asked the captured alien what happens after humans die, the room went quiet in a way I still can't explain. The answer it gave didn't mock religion or deny the soul. In fact, parts of it lined up disturbingly well with the Bible, while other parts challenged everything I thought I understood. What it told me about the human soul, about judgment, and about what continues after the body stops breathing is the reason these recordings were sealed. And it's the reason I was reassigned without explanation. When I spoke, my voice was calm and respectful. I asked, plainly, what happens to humans after they die? The answer arrived calmly, deliberately, as if the subject had been discussed many times before. It explained that humans are not biological accidents, not the unintended result of random processes stumbling into awareness. According to the entity, human life is intentional in structure, even if its origin is misunderstood. Consciousness, it said, does not emerge from the brain in the way modern science often assumes. The brain functions as an interface, a translator, a biological system designed to interact with the physical world. Awareness itself exists independently of it. The entity compared the human body to a vessel, not a source, and said that confusing the container for what it contains is a mistake repeated across civilizations. It continued by explaining that consciousness is not produced by matter, but temporarily bound to it. The brain shapes experience, filters perception, and limits access, but it does not generate the self. Damage the brain and consciousness expresses itself imperfectly, just as a damaged instrument produces distorted sound. Death, in that sense, is not annihilation. It is disengagement. When the body can no longer sustain the interface, consciousness withdraws. This withdrawal is not violent or disorienting. It follows a structure as predictable as birth, though far less understood. The entity spoke of this transition as something observed repeatedly across different species and worlds, as a consistent pattern rather than a mystery. To it, death was not a cliff. It was a threshold. When it described what continues after death, it emphasized continuity over change. Identity remains intact. Memory persists. The sense of self does not dissolve into nothingness. What falls away are the distortions imposed by physical survival, fear, impulse, and limitation. Consciousness becomes clearer, not altered. This clarity is what humans experience as judgment, though not in the way it is often taught. There is no external tribunal, no being weighing actions on a scale. Instead, judgment is immediate self-recognition. Consciousness, freed from denial and distraction, perceives itself fully. Every intention, every choice, every moral compromise becomes visible without distortion. There is no escape from this awareness, not because it is enforced, but because it is complete. This explanation aligned closely with many religious teachings, though framed differently. The separation of soul and body occurs. Moral accountability remains. The self continues. What differs is the mechanism. Judgment is not arbitrary, and it is not punitive in intent. It is revelatory. Consciousness does not suffer because it is sentenced to suffering. It suffers when it recognizes its own misalignment. The entity explained that this recognition is not cruel. It is necessary. Without it, growth would be impossible. This is why, it said, moral choice matters so deeply during physical life. The conditions of uncertainty, limitation, and faith are not flaws in the system. They are the system. When asked indirectly about heaven and hell, the entity reframed them without dismissing their reality. It explained that these states are not locations defined by geography, but conditions defined by alignment. Alignment with truth, selflessness, and what humans often call God produces expansion, connection, and peace. Misalignment produces isolation, contraction, and separation. These are not emotions that pass. They are environments created by the nature of consciousness itself. Heaven and hell are not rewards or punishments imposed from outside. They are outcomes that arise naturally from what consciousness has become. The entity stressed that no soul is forced into torment for the sake of balance. Suffering emerges from resistance to alignment, just as peace emerges from acceptance of it. At this point, the entity addressed human scripture without being prompted. It acknowledged that religious texts describe these realities symbolically because abstraction cannot be easily communicated to developing minds. Stories, laws, parables, and images were necessary tools. They were not meant to be technical manuals, but moral guides. The entity made it clear that the purpose of Scripture was not precision, but direction. Humans were not meant to understand everything fully while embodied. Certainty, it said, collapses moral choice. Faith exists because uncertainty is required for growth. If humans knew exactly what awaited them after death, the meaning of their choices would be compromised. This was where its explanation bridged belief and observation in a way that felt unsettlingly coherent. It did not deny God, nor did it define God in human terms. It described what humans experience as divine presence, as alignment with the underlying structure of consciousness itself. The entity did not worship. It observed. And what it observed confirmed that moral orientation mattered more than belief systems, institutions, or labels. It explained that humans are studied not for their technology or intelligence, but for their capacity to choose good under uncertainty. That capacity, it said, is rare. Toward the end of its response, the entity delivered a line that felt less like information and more like a conclusion. It said that humans often argue over whether faith or science holds the truth, not realizing they describe the same structure from different angles. Your scriptures describe it symbolically. We observe it structurally. That sentence settled into the room and stayed there. In that moment, it became clear that the most unsettling part of its answer was not the confirmation of an afterlife. It was the implication that humanity had been given enough information all along, just not enough certainty to avoid responsibility. Nothing about the answer felt hostile. Nothing felt dismissive. If anything, it felt patient, almost restrained. The entity did not tell us what to believe. It described what it had seen. And when it finished, it remained exactly where it was, calm and unmoved, as if the truth it had shared was not dangerous to it at all, only to us. When I asked why humans don't remember anything from before birth or after death, the entity responded without hesitation, as if the question itself had been anticipated. It explained that memory is not erased as punishment or limitation, but filtered by design. According to it, unfiltered memory would collapse the very conditions that make human life meaningful. If humans entered life with full awareness of what comes after death, moral choice would lose its weight. Fear, courage, sacrifice, faith, and hope would all be odd recognition. Choice, it said, only matters when uncertainty exists. Without uncertainty, action becomes calculation. Earth, in its words, is a low-information environment by intention, not by failure. Humans are meant to live without certainty so that their decisions reveal who they truly are, not who they become when outcomes are guaranteed. It went further, explaining that faith is not a flaw in human design, but a requirement for growth. Certainty removes meaning because it removes risk. Love chosen without certainty is more valuable than obedience produced by fear or proof. The entity did not dismiss prayer, belief, or doubt. Instead, it described them as mechanisms that operate only under limited knowledge. Memory returns after death, it said, but it returns gradually in a way that does not overwhelm consciousness. The process is measured, not sudden, allowing understanding without erasing responsibility. In that sense, forgetting is not loss. It is protection. Humans are not denied truth. They are allowed to arrive at it honestly. The explanation then shifted away from death and toward purpose, and this was where the tone changed subtly. The entity explained that humanity is observed not because it is advanced, but because it is rare. Most intelligent life, it said, does not experience moral struggle the way humans do. In many civilizations, survival pressures are minimal, social structures are fixed, and ethical decisions carry little cost. Humanity, by contrast, exists under constant tension. Humans must choose between self-interest and sacrifice, comfort and responsibility, fear and conviction. This internal struggle is not common. It is the reason humanity is watched closely, not interfered with. The entity made it clear that observation does not mean guidance. Humans are not directed, corrected, or protected from consequence. Intervention would invalidate the very thing being observed. Growth only occurs when choice is genuine. That is why contact is limited, fragmented, and indirect. Humanity is not studied for its technology or intelligence. Those develop naturally across many civilizations. Humans are studied for their choices, for how they behave when no one is watching, for what they do when belief must exist without proof. That, it said, is what makes humanity significant. The question about the Bible was asked carefully, without challenge or expectation. Is the Bible true? The entity did not answer immediately, but when it did, the response was measured and precise. It said that the core truths contained within Scripture are preserved, though imperfectly expressed. Human language, culture, and history shaped how those truths were recorded, and interpretation introduced division where guidance was intended. The message, it explained, was never meant to serve institutions more than individuals. The purpose of Scripture was not control, but orientation. Not dominance, but direction. It did not deny God, and it did not diminish Jesus. Spoke of them with seriousness, not distance. It explained that humans often confuse the message with the structure built around it. Institutions evolve, interpretations fracture, but the central call toward humility, responsibility, love, and moral accountability remains intact. The entity did not validate atheism, nor did it elevate belief systems above one another. It stated only that truth does not belong to institutions. It belongs to alignment. And alignment is revealed through action, not labels. Near the end of the session, the entity stated something that changed the atmosphere in the room. It said humanity is approaching a threshold, not technological, but moral. Innovation, it explained, has outpaced wisdom. Power has increased faster than responsibility. The conditions that justify observation are not permanent. Observation is temporary by nature. It exists only while uncertainty remains meaningful. When moral choice becomes compromised by knowledge, manipulation, or control, the purpose of observation ends. It did not say what comes next, only that participation replaces observation when thresholds are crossed. That line stayed with everyone who heard it. When observation ends, participation begins. Whether that participation is constructive or corrective was not explained. The entity did not frame it as threat or promise. It presented it as consequence, neutral, inevitable. The interrogation ended quietly,